have to watch a clock. I don't even have to watch a clock. I don't even have to watch a clock.
Hello, happy Monday. Welcome to Bold Moves with Mandy Bryce. This is episode number 95, and I spoke with Sierra Annastasia, a young entrepreneur with some very wise beyond her years views on the world, education, entrepreneurship, and all sorts of fun and exciting stuff in Bold Moves. She, I believe, is the youngest guest to be on the Bold Moves podcast so far, so I am excited for you to hear her story. Make sure you listen all the way to the end and be patient with us, please. We were having some technical difficulties that may have made some of the episode a little bit choppy, but I promise it is worth it. All right, thank you so much. Without further ado, I am ready to present to you Sierra Annastasia. Welcome everyone to Bold Moves with Mandy Bryce. I am with Sierra Annastasia, who I haven't asked her age, but might be the youngest guest ever on the podcast. Welcome, Sierra. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. So one of the things that obviously attracted me to your story is that you are so young. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what made you think that you've made bold moves to get on the podcast?
Okay. Well, I'll start with my first business in high school. I started in sophomore year. I had this assignment in a marketing class. We had to make a resume, and I didn't have anything to put on it. So literally nothing. I didn't have any academic awards, any sports awards, anything.
Okay.
So I told my mom, I was like, "Oh, Mom, I need something to put on my resume." So she got me an internship at this local furniture consignment shop.
Okay.
And one of the owners refurbishes furniture, and she's an interior designer. And so she had a project for me to finish for her one day because she didn't have any time in her schedule to complete it. So she showed me how to paint. It was a headboard and a footboard.
Okay.
And so she showed me how to refurbish it, and I thought it was so fun. So I started doing it sort of as a profitable hobby.
Okay.
So I started gaining a lot of clients locally because everybody has furniture and a lot of people want it to look nice.
Sure.
So it was a very popular industry. And so that was kind of my first business.
Okay.
And it was a lot of fun, but it was very labor intensive. I was painting the furniture in my garage, and I would go to Goodwill and buy the pieces and then, have to take them to my house and then take them to where I was selling them. So it was very labor intensive. And when I started college last year, I didn't have time for that in my schedule anymore.
Sure.
So I was I was just thinking a lot about what I wanted to do. I definitely didn't want to get a regular job because they're terrible. Yeah. So I was thinking what can I do that's going to make me enough money to, sustain myself and my lifestyle, and then what is also going to allow me to not have to invest a lot of time in it. So eventually I just came to the conclusion that I wanted to share my strategies of starting my own business at such a young age with other people, whether they're my age or whether they're, they have already have their established brick and mortar, for example, local small businesses. So and I also make websites. So I'm a visual designer and business strategist at the moment. And I absolutely love helping people start their business, helping people build websites that are exactly what they need for whatever exact purpose they need.
Very cool. So I'm assuming, since you made the statement that regular jobs are horrible, that at some point you've had one, or are you just going by what people tell you?
I've had many.
Okay.
Many.
Let's hear about what's been in between then.
Okay. So let me think. My first, any type of job experience ever was that internship.
Sure.
It wasn't paid, but I can't even tell you how like valuable what I learned from them was. I went from never having any job experience to, for them, even now, like I'm not as involved with them, but I have a key to their store. That's how like whenever they go out of town, like I run the store for them. So that was probably like the best experience I've had so far as like, you know, learning about becoming an adult. And then after that, I think I've worked at a restaurant as it was kind of a mix between fast food and like sit down and you have a waitress type of thing.
Okay.
So working there, there was like a lot of drama. Every job I've ever had, there's always drama. I guess it's because people my age work there. Like, I don't know. I don't understand what the big deal is about whatever it is they're talking about. There's always drama. Like, I don't know you. I don't know why you have a problem with me. I don't know. I don't know. So, so there's always like, the drama is annoying enough, like behind the scenes, like in the back, like hearing people like talk all the time about random stuff that doesn't matter to me. But it annoys me even more when it's like up front in front of a customer. So that's probably one of the number one problems I have with working in regular jobs is every job that I've had, people aren't respectful in front of the customers. And for me, like my entire life, like customer service has just like always been important to me. Like if you're a business and you want people to spend money in your establishment, I don't want to spend money in your establishment if you don't have good customer service. I absolutely hate bad customer service. It's probably my number one business pet peeve. So that was like one of the main reasons that I hated working in like regular corporate style jobs. And then on top of that, having like terrible bosses. My last job, like I'm pretty much a by the books type of person. I don't like to break the rules or anything like that. So my last job was so horrible that like I walked in, it kind of progressed like I think I want to quit. And then after about a week of thinking that, the night before I was my last day, I was like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to put in my 2 weeks. And then it, like, this was in a span of, like, 2 days. I'm going to put in my 2 weeks. And then it went from that to, okay, I'm going to put in a effective immediately letter. And that was my last. And then on my last day, my manager was so kind that she let me leave before the day was even finished. So, I mean, like, the way I thought about it was it's very stressful because I was trying to start my business at the time that I was quitting. So for me, the way that I ended up thinking about it in the end was it would affect me greatly to stay for the remainder of the 2 weeks because I was underappreciated. I was one of the workers who was, you know, doing everything I was supposed to be doing at all times. And it's very annoying when you're keeping up with what you're supposed to be doing. No one else is, but it seems like no one else is getting spoken to about the issues. It's only you because you're the only one who listens and corrects their, you know what I mean? So, so definitely like getting put down all the time, it was just really hard to like maintain. Like it was to the point where I had class. I would get up at 6:30 in the morning, go to class, be at class until 2, drive straight to work, start work at like 3ish, and then I wouldn't get home till like 10:30 or 11. So it was like a full day of just work and school. And then on top of that, all the drama at work, like it just was not worth it to me. So definitely the like 2 biggest things that I've learned from having 9 to 5 jobs, I guess people refer to them mostly, is that like being underappreciated but putting in like my 110%, that's not for me because I want the work I do to move us forward. I don't want it to just like not affect anything because not everyone is doing it. It doesn't make it worth it for me to do it if no one else is. But I don't want to stop doing it because it's the right thing to do. So that, and then working for, you know, trading hours for dollars. Like my other friend, she also thinks of like every time she buys something, she's like, oh, this is an hour's worth of work for like this one meal. This is like 3 hours of work for like this one shirt. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So definitely just, it's so limiting to have those types of jobs. And then when it also, this is really when I was like, okay, I think it's time for me to start my business, because I was definitely picking up on all this, like creating an online presence and sharing your knowledge, creating digital products, that type of thing. So it got to the point where every time someone was like, oh, I really like doing makeup, I was like, oh my gosh, start a business. And then like one of my managers, she is a busy mom. She's a younger mom, and she's a really good cook. So I was like, you should do something with that. And like all these people, every time I said something, they were just like, you're crazy. So I decided that I was going to start a business where people would come to me and then I would help them because they wanted me to. Instead of trying to force everybody else, like, yeah, you should start a business. Yeah. So that's kind of like what I've learned from having my 9 to 5 jobs that were so terrible.
Well, it's really interesting. I'm going to go back and kind of make my way from the beginning of your part of the story to where we are, where we just left off. And one thing that's really interesting to me is the idea behind customer service that you mentioned, because I totally agree that it's so important and so irritating. And I've definitely been in plenty of circumstances where I'm like, okay, you obviously don't want my money because you are not making any effort. Like I've walked into boutiques and had, hopefully it's just an employee and not the owner, but they're sitting there on their phone or computer and don't even look up and say hi. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll just leave.
You're wrong.
Right. I'm like, okay, I'll just go. Like, you don't want my business. Bye. Or if like I ask for something just a little different from what they offer and they can't, I'm like, you really can't wiggle on something. Like you can't exchange these 2 food things or add this, or like, I'm willing to pay more. And if they just say no, I'm like, okay, you don't want my business. So I'm glad that you've learned that, you know, right away, and that that's still important to people, because it seems like customer service is disappearing. But I think too, from the other standpoint, and I catch myself doing this occasionally, is customer service the other way is probably also getting terrible. Like I haven't worked a job like that in a long time, but I believe that in retail, there's probably a lot of people who don't even speak to the cashiers or whatever because they're on their phone while they're in line and while they're paying. And I've definitely seen it. So I think like there's just a lot of politeness kind of that needs to be brought back. What would you say about that? Like, since you've more recently been in retail and in restaurants, have you noticed that a lot of people kind of don't even treat you like a person because they're on their phones? Or
Oh, most definitely. I mean, and it's not like it's everybody. It's not just one role. It's not just like, oh, the person behind the cash register is terrible at their job. No, you're terrible at being a customer. You're terrible at being a boss. You're terrible at being a coworker. It's everybody. And like when you said, like, oh, I would hope it's not the boss in, you know, making those mistakes. Oh, it's my last job. I quit because of my boss. And I mean, I've never met someone so completely inconsiderate of their workers. I am what makes your business. I do my job the way you ask me and better. If you can't treat me with respect, I will not work for you. I'm sorry, but you don't, like, your business is going to ultimately fail eventually if you keep this up, and you need to make drastic changes. I'm not going to be there while you're doing that reconstruction of your business because it's stressful for me to the point where I can't handle it anymore. So it's definitely the boss. And then working with coworkers, I worked with someone who would literally use slang to customers while customers were in the lobby. She would sing like inappropriate songs too. I can't stand that. So there were definitely my coworkers, and then my boss, and then I have a story for every single person who's just terrible with customer service, more of like, you know, just being respectful in general. One time a customer came in and she, like, I told her the amount of what her total was, which was a substantial amount of money.
Yeah.
And she was like talking on and on and on. And I asked her to sign the receipt. So she signed the receipt, and I told her the amount. She signed the receipt. And then she was like, wait a minute. After she signed the receipt, after I told her the amount, she was like, this says $200. And I was like, yes, ma'am. And she said, I thought you said 20. I said, no, ma'am, your total was $200. I don't know, I don't know what you want me to do. And she was like, well, I want you to refund the money. And I was like, well, ma'am, I'm sorry. I'm unable to do that. Physically unable. I don't have the authority to do that. I can contact my boss, and he is the only person. No one here, because she kept asking for a manager. And I was trying to, politely tell her she needed to leave and the situation would be handled later. So in the lobby, she called her bank people, and she was speaking so disrespectfully about me, telling them that I didn't know what I was doing, that I was being so rude to her, and blah, 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 blah. And I was right there. I heard the entire thing because she was very, loud about it. So
Sure.
the entire situation was very interesting. But so I definitely dealt with customers who were very rude, and coworkers and bosses. And so I definitely could vouch for, it's not just customer service thing, it's a everybody thing. People just don't seem to care so much anymore.
Yeah, it's sad. I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
I don't know where the lines are exactly where with the titles that they give generations. I've made it clear that obviously you're a lot younger than I am. And I think I'm somehow in the border between a millennial and Generation X, which I think they've just made up a name for the few years when I was born, and I don't remember what it is. But everyone is always criticizing millennials for different things, and I feel like you have said some of the things that older people criticize millennials for, like you're right on point with them, but I feel like so many of the other things that you're saying are the exact opposite. You care about respect, you follow rules, you do what's expected of you. All of those things are things that I feel like I've heard people be like, millennials don't do that. And then at the same time, what I am hearing from you that they say about millennials, and they say it negatively, but it's something that I completely agree with you on, is about working smarter and not exchanging time for money because it doesn't make sense anymore.
Mm-hmm.
What, have you thought about that? Have you read anything are you a millennial technically? Or is there one after millennials that is you now?
Well, I actually, I recently have been in Facebook groups a lot, and somebody asked something that was specific to if you are someone who works with millennials. And I was like, I think that I'm a millennial. I don't know. So I looked it up. Yeah. And basically the people who decide, who is millennial and who isn't, they were saying that if you can't remember 9/11 as, it affected you, then you're Generation Z, I think, is what comes after millennials. Okay. And I was born in 1998, so I'm 19 to answer your question from earlier. I don't have a problem telling you.
I wouldn't figure you would.
Yeah, so I don't remember it.
Okay.
I was a baby. I was 1 or 2.
2 or 3, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I guess I identify as, I don't know. I don't have an identification for it for myself. Whatever other people want to refer to me as, do as you please. But I definitely have run into many times where people will basically talk crap about my age group, and they'll do it with me as a part of the conversation. Sure. Which for one, I don't appreciate, because your argument is ignorant and invalid for the reasons that, for example, one time I had a conversation with somebody about I think he was arguing that we were so involved with improvements that like he was talking, well, for example, the Prius, like how it's energy efficient. He
Yeah.
was talking crap about one of his interns who had a Prius, and he was like, get a real car. Oh, what do you mean by that? What do you mean a real
Get a
car?
car
Like,
that does more damage to the environment.
exactly.
I have a Prius, so you're
Exactly.
preaching to the choir.
Exactly. So like, what's wrong with making energy efficient cars? What's wrong with becoming technologically advanced to the point where like we don't have to do certain things and we can focus on other things? Like, what's wrong with getting a better return on investment? What's wrong with that? I don't understand. And then also, I don't like when people tell me that my generation is uneducated, or that my generation is like always inappropriate and never does anything. Like, I'm sorry that all you pay attention to judge my generation is the media, and that the
Right.
only thing the media shares is things that are entertaining, which just so happens to be things that are maybe inappropriate or that sound uneducated, like that what is that, like, website or show or whatever called World Star, where people show
Oh,
people fighting. Yeah.
yeah.
So
There's
if
not a
that's what
website
gets
that's
there,
like, look at all these millennials and Generation Z people going to school and following
yeah,
rules and being productive members of society. It's a boring
exactly,
show.
exactly, exactly. So if that's what people are sharing, and that's the only source of judgment you can get from my generation, then I don't want to hear you say anything about my generation, because you're missing the other like 90% of it.
Right.
That's just how I feel about it. Because I mean, you can't make an argument for something where you're missing part of the story. That's an invalid argument. It's ignorant. It's stupid.
I agree with you there. My husband, I think, is technically a millennial. So we've had quite a few discussions where it's just
Right.
kind of expressing our frustrations that, it's not worth it anymore to necessarily, like, not that it's not worth it to put in hard work, but I feel like the old expectation of starting from the bottom and gradually going to the top doesn't
Yeah.
make sense when you can get information so quickly and become an expert so quickly that you can
Exactly.
sort of skip steps and not,
Yeah.
like, it sounds like you're skipping steps because you're 19 and you have your own business, but at the same time, like, you still put in the work. You had your internship, you had regular jobs, and you learned from that. And it seems
Yeah.
like,
Just much more
yeah, and
quickly.
being self-aware so that you understand all sides. Like, I'm going to ask you next, I guess, where you're intending on going. So what you're studying in school, if you're still in school, kind of what your goals are. And then I want to kind of come back to other questions that I was just kind of leading to, because I sometimes ask like 5 questions at once and then wonder what
That's okay.
happened.
That's okay. So I will tell you that I was like this close to not dropping out, but I felt like I was this close to it. I wasn't actually going to, because
Sure.
I had already paid for a year, and I definitely wasn't going to throw away that money, because it was only like $6,000 for me, because I went to like a local community college.
Hmm.
Because when I was coming out of high school, I was highly invested in entrepreneurship. I had
Hmm.
not no interest in going to college, but I didn't care about where I went. Therefore, I wasn't about to take out a bunch of student loans and all this stuff. I'm like determined to graduate debt free.
Right.
So I went to an inexpensive college, and like in high school, it was annoying because I was required to be there for like 8 hours in a day,
Hmm.
and the curriculum was so easy. So it was just like, why am I here? Like, I have other things I could be doing with my time. That doesn't entail me going to the mall. That entails me building my business.
Sure.
So, like, it was helpful that I had the work study class.
Hmm.
And so I was able to leave early for my business to go work on it. But, I was still required to be there for an extended amount of time. And
Yeah.
so in college, like, I had a lot more free time during the day when I had classes and stuff.
Sure.
But it was just like sitting in class and being required to learn things that were of no use to me.
Right.
Um, so, like, for example,
Are you there?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know what happened, and I need to see. I'm gonna end the meeting and come back in and see if it recorded the beginning before it cut off, and then we
Okay.
have to like paste them together. So if you stay there, that should still work, or you might have to click on that link again. This has never
Okay.
happened before. I don't know what's going on, so I apologize, but
It's okay.
all right. So we'll
So I chose community college so that I was able to, save money because I didn't see the value in spending a lot of money on something that I wasn't really even like invested in as far as like mentally invested in. So I just, when I was in community college, or when I was in college, I, I just was constantly like being reminded of why I didn't want to go to college in the first place and why I wanted to I was just constantly thinking about like, man, I just wish I could drop out.
Mhm.
And like one good example of why was like my film class.
Okay.
My film class was the biggest waste of time I like, not ever, because there's a lot of things in life that waste our time, but this was one of the most aggravating wastes of time I've ever like paid money for. That's another thing I really hate, is that I have to pay money for these classes that are required. And so it was like I got a 98 on this one project that I invested over 30 hours of my time for. And it was because of my partner's efforts were like, lacking. So I got a 98, and like I just don't appreciate that I didn't get those 2 points, even though I invested everything that I needed to get the
Yeah.
100. So just things like that get on my nerves. So I that's why I was strongly considering dropping out, to the point where I had a serious conversation about it with my family. Like,
Yeah.
not like, oh, I'm going to drop, but like, family, please tell me what I need to know so that I can move forward with the correct decision.
Yeah.
Um, so we eventually came to the conclusion that probably transferring to online would be better for me. So
Okay.
that's what I'm doing. Starting in September, is I'll be taking all my classes online. Like, the college isn't even in this state, so there's no way for me to go on campus for it.
Okay.
So all my classes will be online, and they're also, I think I'm pretty much done with the general education part of college.
Okay.
And like, for the longest time, I had this belief that like, oh, you don't need college. Like I value education, I value learning, I value expanding my knowledge in ways that I can use that knowledge.
Yeah.
So when I'm learning about, the Western film genre, I'm never going to need that. It doesn't teach me any basic skills, like any like, like 2 + 2, like that's something that's foundational that you need
Right.
for the rest of your life. Film class is not foundational. I do not need it.
Right.
So when I took biology this past summer, I definitely saw like where general education comes into play, like as useful. So I just wish the structure of college was better, to where like I don't have to spend like 4 years learning stuff that is not going to be applicable to my career. And like for me, I've kind of taken myself out of the statistic of the average college degree takes 20 years to pay off, that kind of thing.
Right.
But like for other people, they think that college is the answer to having a successful career and having no financial worries for the rest of your life, when it's not. It's like a
Right.
false promise. So I definitely am grateful that like I'll be taking classes. I'm gonna major in business administration,
Okay.
and I'm aiming for the first one, the 4-year bachelor's. So okay.
Yeah.
I'm so not invested in college that I don't even know like what
Whatever that paper they give me at the end is.
yeah. So that's the one I'm getting first, and because I'm taking them online and I can go at my own pace, it'll be like more of an accelerated course for me.
Sure.
And so I'll hopefully graduate in 3 years instead of 4, and then after that, depending on like how valuable the information was for me, I don't mind like continuing my education. But I'm really excited because I took a look at like what the class curriculum is going to be, and it seems like it'll be pretty directly relatable to what I'm doing now, like as a business strategist on that side of my business. I definitely am looking forward to being able to use that information immediately.
That's awesome. I totally agree with that. It's funny because I was actually a middle and high school teacher for 6 years. About 7 years ago was my last year as a teacher. And so obviously, as such, education is very valuable to me. And I'm almost done with my master's degree, but kind of like you were saying, my master's degree is going to be in curriculum and instruction, and I don't teach anywhere, and I don't have any intention of teaching anywhere for a very long time, if ever. So I have very little motivation to finish my final project and get that teaching degree or that master's degree. But it's interesting because I definitely agree with you as an entrepreneur that a lot of time is wasted in schools. And
Yes.
I mean, yes, through middle school, getting like world knowledge and figuring out if you're well-rounded and taking the time to experiment and learn just about a bunch of random things to see if anything becomes your passion is super valuable. But I think when you're a freshman in college and you have to take, like, I took an Indian civilization and history class, and like I think that helped me answer a Jeopardy question once or something, otherwise
Yeah.
it hasn't, like, it was sort of interesting, but largely a waste of time and money. And what's been fascinating to me is I'm in Silicon Valley, right by San Francisco, and there's two businesses I know of around here that are kind of revolutionizing like the college and university process, just because here is so tech heavy. So there's a place that I could walk to from my house here called Udacity. Have you heard of that?
Mm-mm.
So they do what they call micro degrees. And instead of it being like a 4-year process, you could get this probably right out of high school. I don't know what the requirements are to enroll, but it's for things that the technology is moving so fast that if you took these classes your freshman year in college, by the time you're a senior, it would be super obsolete. So you can do, like, I know they have one in self-driving cars. They have about different apps and programming and probably stuff that I don't even understand. And it's kind of like what you said, where it's online and it's to the point, it's applicable to whatever people actually want to learn without having to do all that other requirements, so that it's very specialized. I think it's kind of cool. It'll be interesting to see, I think, how education changes over the next couple of decades, both catching up to technology. So like, I know there's those smart boards that schools are finally starting to use, and people are getting laptops and iPads and stuff in class. And like, it's just hard as a teacher. You can't compete with the attention spans anymore with a book and a chalkboard because kids are used to seeing amazing quality videos for 30 seconds at a time, and that's all the attention even adults have. So that's really interesting to me. So what do you plan on doing as far as your business or businesses moving forward? What do you think you'll do?
Actually, that ties into how I think the evolution of education should happen.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
Yeah. So I found that a lot of people, if they don't take like business classes in high school, if they don't learn about business when they're more coherent and like remember things better, because I mean, like education as a child is important, but a lot of times you don't remember it. So like you learn your basic social skills, and that's how, because you use them every day. So you learn those as a child and like in elementary school, and then in middle school you start to retain like the informational side better. And then once you get to high school, you already are basically who you're going to be. Like, of course, people change after high school, but you're acting socially the way that you're probably going to stay acting out in public with other people around you. So at that point, I find that people are more learning not skills to act, but to think. So that's when they're learning like the information that they're going to retain. So like, I know a lot of people who are like my friends, like within my like close circle of people I talk to regularly, and they're just like astounded by what I'm doing. And like, it's like, I just learned something and now I'm sharing it with other people. That's all I'm doing.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? So I don't like, of course, every business is unique. And yes, it's something to be proud of if you're, starting a business and helping other people with something. But I don't mean astounded as like, oh, that's the best thing I've ever heard in my life. Just like, how could someone like our age do something like that? I don't want
Mm-hmm.
people to think like that anymore. I want people to know that anybody can do this.
Right.
Um, so I have a strong interest in create. This is like gonna sound a little off, but like I don't know how many of you guys have ever heard of Grand Theft Auto, like the video game,
Mm-hmm.
but basically it's like a lifestyle game, and
Mm-hmm.
graphics are they're all right. They're intriguing enough to where like someone would want to continue playing. The
Mm-hmm.
ex- the extent to which I've played that game pretty much stops at driving the cars at like the same speed the automated like computer cars are going, just
Mm-hmm.
for fun, because that was like that's what I did with that game. That was fun for
Okay.
me. Driving at the regular speed the computer cars are going. But I definitely think that the world could benefit from a type of game that's like a lifestyle game in that
Mm-hmm.
way, where you're following a storyline, but instead of being a gangster and teaching children about violence and robbing stuff and that kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
I think that like having an entrepreneurial type of lifestyle game
Hmm.
would strongly benefit having like exposing that lifestyle and like what's involved in being an entrepreneur to
Mm-hmm.
a vast majority of kids ages like I don't know, like 7 to 20. I don't know. I'm not like a video game demographic decider. But
Sure.
definitely I have like a strong interest in pursuing something like that. And
Cool.
like my friend was playing like 2K17 for basketball or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the graphics in that video game, they are like real life.
Oh my gosh,
Like
yeah,
you
they're
could,
crazy.
yeah. So I was paying attention to like the fact that they had like Gatorade and State Farm and all these real life people in there, and I realized that they were sponsoring that. So
Yeah.
I have like I want to find people who are interested in that, like big companies who would like help fund that, because I think that
Okay.
would be very beneficial to like our society to have something that's not violent or not like inappropriate in any way, and it's still fun.
Yeah.
Um, because so many people are like scared by entrepreneurship. Like I was thinking about that recently too. Like people say like to be an entrepreneur you have to be a risk taker, and I mean I've taken risks, like like I've been to the point where like I didn't have any money anymore, like
Mm-hmm.
absolutely none, just because I was being an entrepreneur. But I find that the risk is worth the reward, if you do
Mm-hmm.
it the way that it should happen and you become successful with it. Like I don't know, to me I've never gotten to the point where like, oh, I just want to stop because this is too scary for me. And
Right.
I'm a very easily scared type of person. I'm scared of pretty much everything. um, so I definitely can like see where someone would be hesitant, but for me I've never not done, like I've never not, oh, I want to keep going with my business. I've never
Sure.
decided that I wanted to throw everything out the window just because things got kind of scary. So I want other people to like live that entrepreneurial lifestyle through a game. So then maybe we'll have more entrepreneurs in the world.
I love that. I definitely am going to connect you with a former guest. I think that maybe he could help you with the game idea. Not
Oh,
necessarily the
cool.
sponsors, but maybe. So I will, when we're done recording, send you his information. Um, I would love to interview you again in like 10, 20 years because I am so different in how I behave in high school. And I wonder just if you would like laugh hysterically at yourself for saying that. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, but
Right.
I think you'll see that people definitely changed quite a bit from high school there. But I'm curious, you're just talking about what's scary. What is the scariest thing you've ever done?
Let's see. Hmm. Well, I don't know about like the scariest thing, but I can tell you quite a few stories of when I've been completely terrified. Um, so let's see, when what's it called? Like the annual state fair or whatever comes around.
Okay.
I'm terrified of heights. I'm terrified of bees. I'm terrified of suspenseful things, like things
Okay.
popping out at you and that kind of thing.
Sure.
And all of those things happen at that fair. And so like there's bees everywhere. Like walking down a sidewalk today, like if I were to walk down a sidewalk today, I would walk away from a trash can because bees like build nests in like the lid of them.
Well, and
Um,
I don't know what part of Georgia you're in, but like I've had Savannah honey. Like there's got to be bees all over, right?
well, I don't know like that affects like our bee population, but like definitely one time, we had like this terrible like windy storm and it wrecked like all the trees. Like there were branches everywhere. So I came home and there were bees swarming my yard. I had to leave and go to a friend's house to take my shower because I couldn't get out of my car.
Are you allergic or just scared?
I'm terrified of them. I'm not
Okay.
allergic. Like when I was younger, I don't know if this is why I'm scared. I don't know. I'm terrified of like pain.
Okay.
And like if I don't know what's gonna happen, then like, I kind of start to cry because I'm like, oh, I don't know what's gonna happen. So this is scary.
Okay.
So like when I was younger, I was on my way home in the backseat of the car, and I was just like, doing this with like some Velcro, and the Velcro stung me. It was a bee. So that was like the first time I can remember ever getting stung by a bee. And ever since then, I was like 7, and then I'm 19.
Yeah.
So like 2 years ago was the first time after that I'd ever gotten stung by a bee. I legitimately cried for like 3 hours. It was so terrifying. I was
Wow.
at this event outdoors in like a downtown area, and I felt this pinch. I was waiting for my friend to come from like a food truck, and I felt this pinch, and I was like, what's that? And then I realized it was a bee, so I started crying hysterically. And I walked over to one of like the firemen on the bicycles, and he was like, did you get stung by a bee? And I was like, yeah. So he took the stinger out and everything. I didn't have an allergic reaction. I just cried for 3 hours because I was terrified. I didn't know what was going to happen. So, and then probably like recently, the scariest thing that's ever happened to me, I got my wisdom teeth taken out.
Okay.
So that was terrifying. And like when I got there, they had warned us in like the pre-consultation thing, that I couldn't come in sick, and they didn't explain why. So I mean, I wasn't sick. I went in, and then I sat in the chair. Like they took me back, and I sat in the chair, and I started crying because I mean, they're gonna cut teeth out of my head. So I started crying.
Okay.
And the lady turned around and she was like, oh, that's not good. Why are you crying? And I was like, because I'm scared. And she was like, oh, well, I think we're gonna have to do this another day. And I was like, what do you mean? I cleared a whole week of work off for this. I'm here.
Yeah.
Why can't I get this done? And she was like, well, if you're crying and you develop snot and it goes down into your lungs and you're asleep, because they have to put you asleep,
Yeah.
then you can asphyxiate and die. And I was like, oh, well, give me a tissue because this has to happen today. Because she was like, you can either do the surgery awake. Anybody who knows me knows that is not an option. I have got to be asleep, and it had to happen that day. So she was like, you can either be awake or you can schedule for another day. And I was like, okay, well, this is going to happen the next time too. So we just have to deal with it now. Give me a tissue, and then I will blow out all the snot. I haven't swallowed any yet, so it's okay. I'll blow it all out. We did the surgery, and it was fine. But like,
you didn't die, obviously.
Yeah. It was just so, like, I was terrified, and you can tell that I'm having trouble articulating my feelings. But like even after the surgery, like I had like the IV and like the inside of my elbow, and like I couldn't look at my elbow because it reminded me of having a needle in my arm, and I didn't even feel it. Like I remember asking her, I was like, is there a needle in my arm? And one of the doctors said yes, the other one said no, and then the one that said yes, it's like, oh, no. So like, I have this fear of like pain.
Sure.
But as far as like strategy, like, oh, what if the strategy fails? I have like, it's a strategy. If you plan it right, I'm not saying it's guaranteed to work. I'm not saying like every time someone makes a business plan, it's going to be a successful business. But I think like if you are saying, okay, I'm going to take these 10 steps to get to this desired destination. I'm going to have a successful fashion shop right down the corner in this location, and I'm going to do all these things and it's going to be successful. Like, if you look at the mistakes that other people have made and why they happen, and like if you just look at the how, the why, like the strategy behind everything, the reasoning, the logic behind everything, I don't see how like you couldn't eventually find success.
Sure.
So like if you like run out of money, like do something differently, like expect that, you know, you have to go through the situation before you start the situation so that you can expect these obstacles to come at you. And in the foundational period of creating your business, develop some kind of something that's going to allow you to avoid those obstacles. You know, failing is an obstacle. So how are you going to avoid that? Running out of money is an obstacle. So what are you going to not spend that money on? Running out of time, like, you know, just all of these obstacles. How are you going to avoid them in the beginning stages? How are you going to like develop those foundational elements that will prevent you from like running into them or from being not successful, like from, you know what I mean? Like from just stop, you're not going any farther because this obstacle is here. How are you going to get around it, you know?
So your way of like pushing past fear and avoiding failure is to kind of plan ahead and make a strategy so that you can avoid potential scary things.
Well, as far as like that's what I mean with like the whole like mental like needles and bees and all that type of stuff, that is just scary to me, and I've never been able to not be scared of those things. But as far as like taking a risk to have a successful business, that nothing about it is scary to me. Like I just, you know what I mean? So that's a good, if I'm scared of everything else in life but entrepreneurship, you guys can be entrepreneurs too. How about that?
I love it. And I'm so glad that you ended it on that note, because my next question was going to be prefaced with the fact that I think I know what your answer is, but I'm wondering, if you know your purpose, what would you say it is?
I definitely want to spread entrepreneurship. I don't know if that's the answer you're expecting, but like a lot of times when I tell people that goal that I have, they say, well, if everybody was an entrepreneur.
Oh no, are we frozen again?
That in like the next 20 years or something, percent of the population is going to be like, of like the workforce is going to be like independently owned businesses, small businesses, that type of thing. So I mean, I don't know, I think there's I haven't thought about this, like the schematics of it, but I feel like it makes sense that there's room for an endless amount of entrepreneurs. I mean, if you have a need that you're providing for someone, there's no reason for your business not to be successful. I mean, of course, there are other factors that determine success, but ultimately, you know, the number one thing you have to be doing is providing a need or like a want for something.
Sure.
So if everyone's doing that, then, you know, I haven't like, I'm not like an analyst of this type of thing. So I don't know, like I can't work it out and like plan it out for everyone to be like, oh yeah, these things are like what makes this possible. I feel like in the back of my head, that's just how it works out.
Okay. You broke out a little bit. I couldn't hear you from explaining that when you tell people your goal, they say if everyone is an entrepreneur, and then you kind of cut out, and then you came back to saying that, you know, you believe that in the future there's going to be a lot of small businesses, and that, you know, as long as you're meeting a need, you're going to be successful. So can you kind of fill in what may have gotten lost in technology? Thank you.
I'll just go ahead and say it over again so you don't have to bother with like editing it all together.
Okay, thanks.
So when I tell people this goal that I have, yeah. So when I tell people this goal that I have of like, I want to share entrepreneurship with as many people as I possibly can, they tell me like, well, if everybody's an entrepreneur, then nobody would not be an entrepreneur. Therefore, you wouldn't have like your corporate offices and like I guess they see corporate office type of business settings as like the staple of our economy. But really, like, if like, I don't know how to explain like the analytical side of it, but to me, it just seems like if everybody's providing this a need or like a solution to a need or a want that other people have, like, they're going to pay money for it. Therefore, that's a successful business model at its very basic bare bones. But because of course there are other factors, but like I saw a statistic that was talking about how in like the next 10 or 20 years, about 40% of like people like of the economy is going to be made of small businesses and like entrepreneurs, freelancers, independent contractors, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I mean, if everybody has like, if everyone's providing something valuable as their business, I don't see any reason for it not to be successful.
That makes sense to me. Yeah. One thing that I was going to ask earlier when you were talking about how your former bosses have been and what you've learned mostly by bad examples, is I'm curious if you have any employees or if you ever plan to have employees. And I think like with even just saying before too, the wise thing you said that, you know, you've decided to change your business model basically from telling people who are passionate about doing a certain thing that they should start a business doing that and having them say you're crazy, to having people who want to start businesses and have a passion come to you. Like, I feel like those first people who are telling you you're crazy are the perfect employees, right? So do you plan to have employees? Do you have employees? What is your whole thought on the employee thing?
Well, I definitely don't think that like there's anything wrong with having employees. But as of right now, I don't have employees because I haven't expanded to the point where I need them yet.
Sure.
But one thing I will say is that when I signed up for ConvertKit, they sent me an email from like their customer service team. And it was this guy. And he was saying, the video was like, he was like, hey, Sierra, so glad that you've, you know, joined our company and that we're going to be able to help you grow. I checked out your website and I saw that you used to refurbish furniture and now, you know, you're a visual designer, business strategist. Like, he invested the time to go to my website or learn about who I was and then not send an email, but record a video.
Sure.
To send it to me, to welcome me to their company. I just seriously, I was so floored. I was speechless. I'm still kind of speechless. This was months ago. So like, that was like just the best customer experience that I've ever had. So I've thought that if I want to hire somebody in the near future, I feel like right now I can handle it all myself because I'm not that busy to where like I need someone else. Like right now it's manageable for just me. But I definitely want customer service to be like one of the number one top priorities in my company. So if I were to hire somebody, it would be so that either I can do it or they can do it. Somehow, once it gets too busy for me to handle everything, I want someone or myself to work it out to where we're sending videos like that to customers, because I think that's like just the most phenomenal thing I've ever seen as far as like a virtual customer relationship. So that's definitely something I'm interested in, is having an employee to help me with that aspect of my company, you know, making my customers happy, making them appreciate like our relationship, not just, oh, maybe I'll send an email and maybe I'll get a response. Like, I want to be on level 100 million of customer service. So I definitely have an interest in hiring someone for that.
Sure.
And as far as anything else, like I don't know right now, like what I might potentially need someone for in the future.
Sure.
So we'll see what happens in that area.
That's interesting because I had at least a trial with ConvertKit, and I may have paid for a few months, and I ended up switching to a different company, but I don't think I even got to the point where I opened most of the emails. Like, I think I signed up earlier than I was ready to have my list. So that means somebody probably made me a sweet video that I've never seen. So now I'm going to go and search my emails because I would be like, oh no, that poor person wasted their time. So another question, kind of moving forward a little bit, is what advice you would have to any listeners about anything that you've learned in your 19 years so far? Can you hear me?
Yeah, kind of. It's breaking up.
Okay, I'll start the question again. Next question would be, what advice do you have to any listeners about anything that you've learned so far? I've appreciated the wisdom you've shared up to now, but anything missing that you want to send along?
Well, I have a story for this. Is that okay?
Yeah, please do. Share.
Okay. So the other day I don't know if you can see it, that right there hanging on my wall, that macrame thing, macrame wall hanging.
There you go.
I went to Home Depot to get some supplies for that, and so that I can have a nice video background for, like, because I'm interested in recording more videos as opposed to like writing text posts.
Yeah.
So
you just spoke about how valuable it is. So
yeah. So I was getting the supplies for that, and I ran into this guy, and like the weird thing about it is, like, I ran into like one employee at Home Depot who didn't like ask me specifically like, oh, do you need help? But I could have reached out to them and said, hey, I kind of need some help finding this and this. So I didn't do that, and I kept walking, just kind of looking around the store. And I was walking down the pipes aisle, and this guy was having a conversation with this girl. Like, the employee was the guy and the girl was the customer. And so I walked up to that situation where he didn't seem to be free, and he was like, oh, do you need help with something? I was like, oh, you can finish with her first. And they ended up just being friends, and she was like, oh no, it's okay, I'll see you later, Austin, blah blah blah. Yeah. And so that ended, and this guy and I, he was helping me, and then I started talking to him about like what I needed it for, and like the supplies for, and what I was doing, and just making conversation. He was like, oh, that's so cool. And so we started having this conversation about how he was like in college for a semester, and then he dropped out because he wasn't feeling the environment, and he didn't feel like he was benefiting from it. So he dropped out, and now he didn't really know what he wanted to do with his life. And I was like, okay, so what are you interested in? Because this is literally exactly what I help people do.
Right.
And so I was determined to give him some direction before I left Home Depot. So we ended up having this like really in-depth conversation about like what was holding him back from doing anything, and the fact that he didn't really know what he could do. He just knew what he was interested in. And so I was telling him, I help people start businesses based off of the motto of like having digital products. Yeah. So I told him, I was like, well, you can take any of those interests you have, literally any of them, and you can create a digital product about it. And then you can create a passive income stream. And then you can fund other projects that you have that you want to pursue. And so he was like, that's really cool. And like literally everything that he was saying, I had gone through before, and everything that I was saying, he told me is basically sounded like exactly where he wanted to go. And so he told me that like he didn't really think that he could do anything like what I mentioned about like starting a business, because people around him, he knew that they were going to say like, oh, I don't know about that, or oh, well, that's never going to work out, all those types of people.
Right.
so I told him I literally wanted to like shake his shoulders, be like, oh my goodness, no, you can't let these people scare you off. They don't know about what the potential is. They're not the ones to know.
Sure.
You are, and the people who are trying to help you, like me, who are telling you you can do this, those are the people that know, and that's why they're telling you you can. The people who don't know are going to tell you that you shouldn't based off of their inexperience in doing it. So you can't let someone tell you who's never done it before not to do it. So that's my number one advice is don't not do something because someone else thinks that they don't know. Like I don't know like why people tell you that you can't do something if they know nothing about it. But don't let that hold you back. Because you're in this tiny little circle, like this tiny little circle of people. And if you're the only one who's willing to like do something like that, then of course all of those people, like none of those people are gonna have experience with that. None of those people are gonna have thought about that. So they're all going to seem like, not that they're putting you down, but just that like they're not all going to be like, oh yeah, go do that, that's awesome, So don't let that small circle of people, like before you tell yourself you're not the person to do that, go like in Facebook groups, go in groups where there are people who do what you intend to do, go in like entrepreneurial groups and groups that are related to your potential niche of like, oh, I'm interested in knitting, or oh, I'm interested in woodworking. Go and see what other people are doing, and then you'll see the potential for success. And then I guarantee you'll at least get a little bit of, oh, I think maybe I could do that. And even if right after you're like, oh no, never mind, I can't, don't listen to it. Just do it. You can do it. Just try, because I mean, it doesn't cost a lot of money. If anything, you can do it completely free. So all you're investing is time and maybe money if there are certain things that you think, oh, well, I would rather pay for that than have the free version. So you definitely can. You just have to map out like where it is you want to go, what you're going to run into that's going to like, oh, well, maybe this would stop me. So how can I get around that? You have to map out a plan for yourself. And if you're okay with that, then you can do it. You know what I mean? So
I love that.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the combination of a few of my favorite pieces of advice. So like one of them is just consider the source when you're asking for someone advice. I used to take advice from somebody, like I would take relationship, business, all types of advice from this one person who didn't really have a lot of friends, was in a very unhappy marriage, didn't have good relationships with her family, and had filed bankruptcy. And I took her advice for so many years. And then after that, I'm like, why did I think that she was qualified to give me advice? So that's one thing. The second thing is like that whole idea of being the combination of the 5 people you spend your most time with. And that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room unless you're there to like specifically help people, is fantastic with your idea. Like it's 2017. If you can't get them in your room, you can be in the Facebook group and still find those people. So I think that's fantastic advice. Sticking to the advice themes, I got some of those from some books that I've read and loved. Do you have any book recommendations you'd like to share?
Actually, reading is one of the biggest parts of like who I am. Like when I was younger, that was a huge part of my childhood. Like I got bedtime stories all the time. I was reading nonstop. I was always like in advanced reading levels. And around like high school, like middle of high school, I probably like stopped reading so much. And now I'm at the point where I'm not reading. So as far as recommendations, the best that I can do for you is I'm about to read, because I'm a part of like a sort of like a business like group. Like we're a part of like a membership type of thing. And so part of our membership is having like a book club type of deal. So the book that we will be reading is You Are a Badass by
Jen Sincero.
Yeah.
I haven't read it, but it's on my list.
Okay. So if we both think it's a good read to even try out, then maybe your viewers will appreciate that book as well.
Cool. I like that. All right. So then, even though, like, I don't want you to just recommend a book you haven't read yet. So even it doesn't have to be a business or personal development book, but back when you were a kid or before high school, before took a break from reading, what were some books that you loved? Because sometimes too, especially as type A, high achieving entrepreneurs, it can be hard to take a break from working, but it's definitely valuable. So maybe even something just relaxing to spend the
Right.
afternoon away from work that's entertaining.
Well, as a child, my favorite series was the Boxcar Children.
Old school, I love it.
Yeah, that was now that I'm thinking about it, I'm making some connections. They had to find what was going to work best for them to survive. I'm don't really remember like why weren't they like rich, but they were living in a boxcar. Like I don't
I don't
remember.
think they were anymore. I think something happened to their family or their parents or something, and then they had to move into the boxcar.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
But it's been like 30 years since I've read them. So. All right, so the Boxcar Children.
Yeah,
All right, that's a good one. And I
yeah,
think
it's been quite a while since I've read it. Yeah, that was my favorite series, definitely.
that's a great recommendation because sometimes books meant for children or young adults, like you said, have great lessons and it's not as big of a commitment. I mean, obviously that's a whole series, so that does make it a little bit more of a commitment,
Yeah,
but it's something, at least one of the books you could probably read quickly in an afternoon or
yeah,
over a couple of days on the weekend or something like that.
definitely. And something a little more like for older ages.
Sure.
Um, a couple years ago, I wrote this book. I think it was like called The Night Ranger or something.
Okay.
Um, and it was really interesting. It was I got it off of the like $5 rack at Books a Million, and
Okay.
it was really interesting. It was about this guy who was like had this son. Somebody went missing, and then these kids like went on this mission trip or like volunteer trip
Mm-hmm.
to Africa. They got kidnapped, and so this guy from America used to be like this FBI agent or something, and he went over there to rescue them, and it was really interesting. Like it
Hmm.
was from multiple perspectives.
Okay.
Of so you got like a look into like what's happening to the people who were kidnapped, what's happening to the guy who's saving them. So it was
Mm-hmm.
really interesting. It was like an action novel,
Okay.
which like as a younger me, I probably wouldn't have picked something up like that, but I found it very entertaining. It was very interesting. It wasn't like weird. You know how like there's bad acting and there's like
Yeah.
books that kind of mirror that. This wasn't like that. It was very like genuine. So
Cool.
that was a pretty good one.
Awesome. In case ODB has been listening to everything that you've had to offer and thought, I would really like to start my own business and I would love for Sierra to help me do that. Where can they find you online, on social media, your website? Where can we find more of Sierra?
Well, I'm most active like if you have questions in my inbox. So if
Okay.
you want to email me, that's on my website. My
Okay.
website is choicebysierra.com. Choice
Okay.
like making choices by the water. And then my name, Sierra, choicebysierra.com.
Okay.
Um, so on my website, I have lots of free resources for people if they just want to sign up to get the password for that. And
Okay.
I have resources on creating your brand, and like the importance of that, and creating your blog, creating your website, and starting a business, just all kinds of resources. And then if you have any questions, definitely send me an email. I have all of my social media links on my website. So
Okay.
Instagram, Behance, Pinterest, and Twitter. I have
Okay.
them all on there too as well if they'd like to connect in those ways.
Cool. And that'll also all be in the show notes too, so that people can easily access that. My last question is a question that I've asked even before I had a podcast, and so I save it for last because it's my favorite. And that is, if 8-year-old Sierra could look into a crystal ball and see 19-year-old Sierra and everything that happened in the 11 years leading to where you are now, on a scale of 1 to 11, how excited would she be to see where you are now?
Probably like 100.
That's awesome.
Definitely, like where I came from, it wasn't like a bad place or anything. It was just like a strugglesome environment, you know.
Okay.
So like whether that be, you know, kids putting you down at school or just not having like everything you want when you want it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like not having much growing up, I definitely would be excited with like the fact that I've been able to work for everything that I have so far,
Mm-hmm.
with like such a supportive like community of family friends, my friends from school, that eventually, you know, I was able to make the right friends, you know, and just like get this support community of people who are like, oh, you're doing this crazy thing, okay, well, here's my advice, you know, go do it. It's definitely, I would be excited to see like how successful I've come to be at this point and the like promising future.
Sure. That's awesome. And I love that you say like that you were able to work for everything you got, because I think that's another thing where if anybody's listening to this, you have something bad to say about lazy millennials or lazy Generation Z, that was genuine
Oh,
gratitude.
yeah. I pay for everything that like I get, you know, like I pay for my
Sure.
Mac, and these beats were free because they had like a thing where like you get a free pair of beats. So I didn't pay
Yeah.
for the beats, but I did pay for the $2,000 Mac, which was a huge expense. I paid for my car. That's another thing. I didn't pay for an expensive car. My car is paid off. It was only $2,000, and it looks very ugly, but I don't care because it gets me from A to B, and I
Yeah.
have a really nice Mac that I use every day. I don't use my car every day, but I use my Mac every day. So
Right.
pick and choose what you're going to invest in, because investing in a really nice car, I mean, I don't need that right now. I'll
Right.
want that when I have the money for it, but when I had to make the choice, I wanted a nicer computer because that's what I was going to be spending like 90% of my time on.
Yeah, I mean, if your car and computer cost the same, but you use the computer more, that's definitely more important.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time and everything that you've shared with us. I know that people will be inspired and probably be coming your way for advice or all those generous free resources you were talking about.
Yeah, sure. It was so fun to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much. If you know anybody who wants to start their own business or turn their passion project into a business or even a profitable hobby, which is a term I've never heard, but I loved it when Sierra used it, make sure you send them to this episode and to the show notes, because as you heard, Sierra has so many generous resources that she's sharing for free on her website, and you can find the link to that in the show notes at www.mandiem.com/episode 95, because we are in our 95th episode. I can barely believe it. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you subscribe so that you get Sierra's fun challenge for Friday. Make sure you share this with friends, like I said, especially friends who are thinking about starting businesses and maybe need a little bit of encouragement or resources. I think this is perfect for that population, but really anybody else, or if you have any millennial haters. Anyway, I digress. Share it out. Please subscribe. Please tell us you love us on iTunes so that other people will listen too. My goal is to get so many people, as many people as possible, to follow their dreams and live their dream lives. And you can help me do that by doing those things that I mentioned. If you're listening and thinking, well, I've made some bold moves myself, please apply to be on the show. You can do that at www.mandiem.com/guest, GUEST, and send that link to other people that you know that have done bold moves themselves, because I think sharing those stories is super inspiring. That's my whole purpose of the podcast. So I would love to have more people on the show. All right, stay tuned for Friday. And as always, be bold and have a sparkly day. Bye-bye.